And this is the question for all of you listeners right now. Where do the rich bank? Where do the rich hide their money? And is it legal? Is it illegal? So I know that most people here think that banking, let's say, offshore is illegal. And it's just like taxes. You can do it legally or you can do it illegally. And what we're going to be talking about today is how it's done illegally and what has been happening out there. But just for full disclosure, I personally do it, and we do it legally. So there's financial education for the poor, and the financial education for the poor is cut up your credit cards. And for most poor people, that's not a bad idea. For the middle class, the financial education is live debt-free, live below your means. Pay off your car, pay off your house, pay off your college loan, and just live below your means. And that's very good advice for the middle class. But this is the Rich Dad Radio Show, and you come to hear something different. So you're going to hear today the biggest game of all. Where do the rich hide their money? Do you think their money is at their local federal credit union? Do you think they're down at the Bank of America branch? Do you think they're with some other little company overseas, your local bank, your next door neighbor bank? Of course not. So today you're going to be hearing about the biggest game of all is where do the rich bank? So like I said, in full disclosure, I do what we're talking about. And joining me today is Tom Wheelwright, who is my personal advisor on taxes and accounting. And Tom would make sure I did it legally, right, Tom?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because don't do it illegally. But also today, our special guest, and I'm really excited about talking to him, is Brad Birkenfeld. And he's a former international banker with UBS, Union Bank of Switzerland, I believe it stands for. And he turned into the biggest whistleblower in history. In other words, he blew the whistle on his own bank, UBS, United Bank of Switzerland. So he's going to be telling you how the rich were playing the game so-called illegally. That's how they hide their money. And the reason Tom is here is the U.S. government doesn't mind if you keep your money overseas. Is that correct?
No, of course not. As long as you do it legally, you're not trying to avoid taxes, and you disclose it. Everything's fine.
Yeah. So please, all of you listening out there, this is not your local federal credit union banking stuff. So I want you to listen to this. You come to get educated. But I think what you'll find pretty juicy about this whole stuff here is Brad Birkenfeld is the author of Lucifer's Bank. And I just started reading it. And it's better than a porno novel. I mean, it is really so exciting to read because he names names in there. And some of the names he names are, very honest people like Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. And the list will go on. So the book is called Lucifer's Bank. If you really want to read an exciting book on where the rich bank and why they bank that way, and why is it that so many politicians like Miss Clinton and Mr. Obama enter politics as poor little church mice, but leave mega rich? Don't you ever wonder that? Don't you ever wonder that? How come they enter poor, but leave mega rich? So welcome to the program, Mr. Brad Birkenfeld.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here today and to educate your audience.
Thank you. And you're right now broadcasting, you're speaking to us from Malta, right?
I'm calling you from Malta. That is correct.
And Malta is a very beautiful place. I've never been there, but I've heard it's a great place for taxes, right, Tom?
It is, actually. We use it in tax planning all the time. So,
Brad, what happened with you? You're the biggest whistleblower ever. I mean, you turned in your own bank. You were paid $100 million, is that correct, for blowing the whistle on them? But you had to spend 3 years in jail first.
Well, for your audience, what it was I exposed the largest and longest-running tax fraud in the world. At UBS, where I worked in Geneva, Switzerland, they managed 19,000 accounts and $20 billion in assets. So you can imagine this had been going on for decades, long before I started working there and long before I was even born. So this kind of business, this nefarious business where people hide their monies in secret Swiss numbered accounts, was an attractive venue because of two reasons. One, you had political and economic stability, but you also had anonymity where you would never be disclosed because you had the Swiss bank secrecy ingrained in their constitution.
In other words, for centuries, for a long time, Swiss have been noted for their privacy for the rich. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's exactly right. And it really came to bear early on in the 20th century when the Third Reich came to power with Adolf Hitler. He had informed anyone in Germany if they moved a Pfennig, which is a penny, out of the country, they could be shot. And the reason for that was they were trying to keep money for the war effort for World War II. That was in 1933. In 1934, in Article 47 of Swiss Constitution, they passed Swiss bank secrecy, meaning they would never disclose the client's identity no matter who asked for the information. Somewhat like attorney-client privilege or medical privilege. This was financial privilege, and it made sense at the time. It was a tit for tat, if you will.
But didn't the Nazis, the head Nazis, keep a lot of money in Switzerland?
Well, this is the hypocrisy of the whole thing. You know, the Swiss said, don't invade us or we'll blow up the tunnels and bridges so you can't get down to the North African theater in Italy, and we'll quietly wink, wink, nod, nod, and be your bankers. So, yeah, there was too cozy a relationship between the Swiss and the Nazis, and, they keep trying to divorce themselves from this, but it's really hard to do because the facts speak for themselves.
And I think what you're saying in your book, Lucifer's Banker, the relationship between the Swiss still goes on with Hillary and Obama.
I will say that Hillary was an integral part of a criminal cover-up. And I've said it time and time again, and I can justify it not only because I know what I'm talking about, but I also have documents to prove it. And on my website, lucifersbanker.com, you can go onto UBS Scandal and look at UBS documents, and there's a CIA cable there in which Hillary Clinton gets exposed by WikiLeaks back in 2009.
And she was secretary. She was Secretary of State at the time.
She was appointed Secretary of State, and she got involved in an international criminal investigation, which she never should have been involved in. She had no right to do that, but yet she elected to do so. And the problem with this is that when you looked at the situation, if you read the one-and-a-half-page document on my website, it's a CIA cable, Hillary Clinton's political solution to UBS. They closed the company down in Denmark, the Swiss did, and they accepted two Chinese Uyghur Guantanamo detainees, which was Obama's bread and butter, to close that down. Two Chinese Uyghur, they're sort of Western Chinese Uyghurs that were in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and they took them in exchange for settling the UBS case. Well, in this email, and you can see it, it's a CIA cable, which they never thought would be exposed, but it's there on my website, and it's classified. Geez, that's right. She never sent any classified information. Here's a classified email right here that shows in particular detail that says, to bring home the point, she reiterated, the finance minister, that this resolve extended especially to finding a political solution to the UBS case.
So did UBS happen to donate to the Clinton Foundation by any outside chance?
Well, the Swiss gave to the Clinton Foundation during the exact same time she was negotiating this secret deal with the Swiss, which in effect, gentlemen, and for your audience, and this is critical to understand, 300 million Americans have been cheated by Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, and I'll tell you why. First and foremost, there was 19,000 accounts, and she only settled for 4,700 account names, not 19,000. That's a 75% failure rate. Second, they fined the bank $780 million. $200 million went to the SEC, $580 went to the IRS, and they complained they couldn't pay much more. This is $1 trillion bank with assets. The problem is that in the deferred prosecution agreement that the bank received was that they said, off of the numbers I provided, $200 million a year in profits were made, and they targeted an 8-year period. So from 2000 to 2007, the window that they targeted, 8 years, they made $200 million a year. Quick math will tell you that's $1.6 billion. Well, wait a minute. You only fined them $580. Where's the other billion? To make the American taxpayer whole, not even to address fines, penalties, and interest. So then the third point, they signed a secret non-prosecution deal with Martin Lichty. He was the head of all of the Americas, my big boss at the bank. And 2 weeks later in the Senate, he pled the Fifth Amendment.
Jeez.
That's illegal. It's a felony. You have a secret non-prosecution agreement, which you didn't tell the Congress about. You allowed him to plead the Fifth in front of the Senate. And then 2 weeks later on Senate summer recess in early August of 2008, they let Martin Lichty go back to Switzerland, a free man.
Once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. Our guest today is Brad Birkenfeld. He is the former international banker with UBS, United Bank of Switzerland, and he turned United States whistleblower. He's one of the few Americans inside the inner sanctum of UBS. Also is Tom Wheelwright, who is my personal tax advisor. And the subject today is, where do the rich really do their banking? You know, is it at their local neighborhood bank or the Federal Credit Union? I mean, where do they bank? Or their teachers' credit union? So what you're hearing about from Brad Birkenfeld, he is the whistleblower that blew the whistle on UBS. He was, instead of welcoming him with open arms and saying thank you for disclosing the criminal activity that's been going on in UBS since the Nazis, they sent him to jail for 3 years. And so after he got released, the IRS paid him $100. Archived them because we're an educational program. We're not an advisory program. And because it's educational, repetition is how we learn best. Like if you listen to this program a second time, you'll pick up whole new distinctions you didn't have before. But also, I think you have friends, family, and business associates who would like to listen to this program, especially because it's about the question, where do the bankers really keep their money? Where do the rich really keep their money, and at what banks? So our special guest today is Brad Birkenfeld. He's a former international banker with UBS. He's one of the few Americans inside the inner sanctum of UBS, and he turned the biggest whistleblower in the United States. He received $104 million for blowing the whistle on the corrupt practices of UBS, United Bank of Switzerland. But he had to spend 3 years in jail first before he got the money, because he blew the whistle on some very, very powerful people, more specifically today, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. And I was talking to Brad. I said, you're a brave man, because they take people out for less than that. So before we go on, I mean, being a whistleblower is a pretty gutsy move. So Tom, as a certified public accountant, what does being a whistleblower mean to you?
Well, what it really means, and Brad's kind of the king of whistleblowers. I mean, if you want to put it that way.
He took the money and ran, but he kept blowing the whistle.
You know what? The point of the whistleblower program is to uncover things like UBS, where you have fraud going on. You know, the difference between legal and illegal is when you're hiding your money or putting your money offshore, is that if you put it offshore with the intent to defraud the U.S. government out of taxes, that's illegal.
And I don't do that.
No, you don't do that at all.
I pay my taxes.
Right. If you put it offshore in order to protect it from creditors, that's totally legal. So the two completely different things here. And what Brad blew the whistle on was not the people who were doing it legally, but the people who were hiding money and defrauding the U.S. government out of tax revenues. Right, Brad?
Well, that's exactly right. And I think there's many people that know about offshore banking legally, which is there's certain hedge funds and investment funds that are very attractive to do offshore, which makes sense.
How about Apple computers?
And then, of course,
Apple hides a lot of money offshore.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, you have the corporations that have these loopholes that are so excessive that they've been able to take advantage of those loopholes. And people begin to wonder why that's in place. Well, you can go look at the tax code that's written in the Congress and start there. But it's such a complex issue. I think when you talk about the personal level, individuals, when you want to put money overseas, a lot of people do it, again, for illegal purposes and legal purposes. But the main thing that we saw was a lot of times people were hiding money not only from just the tax man, but from a business partner or even a spouse.
That's a good idea.
They just never trusted them.
I have a lot of friends who need that advice.
Well, it was done quite often, I can tell you. And
I know.
I think the thing is that just at UBS, just to give your audience an idea, Geneva, Switzerland, where I worked, was about 200,000 people, and there was 130 banks in that town. So you can imagine there's an enormous amount of wealth, and it's not Swiss money in those banks. It's foreign money in the banks. So you had an amazing system where people were attracted to Switzerland for the secrecy and zero tax, as well as political stability. So it worked very well for many, many decades.
So, Brad, let me ask this question: why? Because you're an American, you've made it. You're in the inner sanctum of the Swiss banking system. Envious position, power position. Your job is only to go. You said they called you a hunter. You went down and looked for high, rich people to move their money into the bank. That was your job. Why did you blow the whistle?
Well, what had happened was a colleague brought up to me a 3-page document that was on our intranet, the internal computer system. And he had brought it to my attention, and I said I had never seen this document, which pretty much contradicted everything we were doing, meaning going to the United States, seeing clients, going and marketing, bringing account opening forms, bringing investment products, and so on and so forth. So when I saw that document, number one, someone had to write the document. Number two, someone was authorized to put it on the internet, and we were never trained on it. So it was really more of a CYA for the bank and putting the bankers at risk out there. And I challenged it immediately, and I went to my my department head. As a director of the bank, I had a $10 million signature power. And I said, this is wrong. This is something wrong here. You're laying us out to dry, and we're not paid to take risks like this.
So
and they pretty much pushed me away. They wouldn't even respond to me. So I immediately memorialized it to the head of legal and the head of compliance. And for 3 months, they never answered it. So at that point, I resigned from the bank, took documents out of the bank that could justify what I was saying, because I know how corporations work. And then I blew to the board of directors, and that's when the whole thing really got ugly.
Brad, it sounds like that memo basically was saying we're gonna lay this onto the bankers and not take responsibility as the bank.
Precisely correct, and that's exactly what they were doing. So a lot of people said, "Oh, you just did it to get the money." That's totally incorrect. I started whistleblowing in March of 2005, and the law wasn't passed until December 2006, a year and 9 months later. So, I can't predict the future, and I didn't certainly know about that law. All I did was I was doing the right thing, not only for me, the clients, my colleagues, and the shareholders of the bank. Can you imagine that for a moment? If you're a shareholder of this bank, and they end up paying millions of dollars, which they paid, $780 million fine, which was nothing, and they've paid 50, 60, 70 million just in legal fees to defend themselves. Why should the shareholders of the bank pay for that? They knew it was illegal.
So once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're talking to Brad Birkenfeld. He's a former international banker with UBS, turned the United States' biggest whistleblower. So, Tom, any comments you want to make about what Brad is talking about?
Well, I'm curious, Brad. What happened when you disclosed this to the U.S. government? Well, I mean, what was the immediate reaction on their part?
Well, the problem was I asked. Remember, I could not give up names. I asked for immunity first, and they refused to give me immunity. And then I asked for a simple subpoena, and they refused to give me that at the Department of Justice. They were totally hostile towards me. And I had given up my career. I had blown the whistle internally. I had sent it to the board of directors who called an investigation. Then I finally left the bank and came to America. And they just were so hostile towards me. But the very first client I gave to the Department of Justice, and the only client I could give them, because he was involved in terrorist financing, it's a book. It's Abdul Aziz Abbas. He had 6 numbered accounts, and he had $420 million in illegal oil sales with Saddam Hussein. Now, why didn't the DOJ go after this person? He had a $50 million condo in New York City on the 46th and 47th floor of the Olympic Tower. He had his own private phone line in his boss's office. And they said, we're not interested in non-Americans. I said, well, really? Would you be interested in those non-Americans that flew the planes in the World Trade Center? They were non-American.
So why would the Department of Justice be hostile to you?
there's several reasons. It's a great question. First and foremost is if they're such super sleuths, which they claim to be, why didn't they uncover it? That's the first question, and they failed miserably. The second question is I had to educate them and gave it to them on a platinum platter, and they still screwed it up. The third reason is all of their rich buddies who are in law firms and politics and so forth had accounts, and the CIA had accounts. So what these people were doing were using Switzerland as a piggy bank, and I blew the whole roof off this house party. Since they wouldn't give me a subpoena, I then went to the U.S. Senate. And at the time, the Senate was more than happy to give me a subpoena. Now the DOJ lost control of this. Then I went to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Then I went to the IRS. And all of a sudden, all of these organizations, which really don't work together, competed for taking the credit.
So once again, this is Brad Birkenfeld. He's a former international banker with UBS turned United States whistleblower. His new book out is called Lucifer's Banker. But what makes his book, Lucifer's Banker, so powerful is who he blew the whistle on. And is that why you went to jail?
Well, I'll put it this way. Nobody at UBS went to jail except me, the whistleblower, who came forward. They all got secret non-prosecution agreements. But it gets even worse. I was the only person to go to jail in the entire financial crisis. There's not one other person that went to jail from a bank.
So
that's where the American people should be outraged. You're punishing the guy that gave you the largest and longest running tax fraud in the world, and the one guy who goes to jail is the whistleblower, and all the other bankers get scot-free.
But what you're saying too is it's a web, it's not a person.
It's a very complicated web in which you have very powerful politicians, CEOs, billionaires, and I've mentioned some of them. And ironically, my publisher in America wouldn't publish some names in my book, so I just published my book in Germany, and they published two of the names that I put in there, two billionaires, Jack Manning of Boston Capital in Boston. He's the CEO. He had an account at UBS, as did Leonard Lauder of the Estee Lauder family.
So let me ask you this. I've asked this question before to you, Brad. Aren't you afraid of your life? I mean, you're stepping on, not toes, you're stepping on Superman's cape.
Well, it's important to tell the story, number one, and to do the right thing, not only just for the American people, but for the world, and to make sure people understand that this kind of activity is not going to be tolerated. And whistleblowers should be embraced, not attacked and ridiculed. They should be promoted and paid because they put so much on at risk, their life, their livelihood.
Podcasts are archived at richdadradio.com. And again, the reason we archive them is because we're not an advisory service. We're information. We're educational. And since it's educational, the more you listen to this program, the more you will learn again and again and again. But also you can have friends, family, and business associates listen to this rebroadcast or the podcast of this program, because we are here to, educate people about what the rich do with their money. If you listen to other people who say, cut up your credit cards and go to your local banker and get a FICO score, this program is not for you. And we definitely don't live below our means here. So the Rich Dad Radio Show is for people who want to understand why the rich are so much richer. So our guest today is Brad Birkenfeld. Again, he's a former international banker with UBS, United Bank of Switzerland, and he turned the United States' biggest whistleblower. He was sent to jail for 3 years. But he didn't know this, but because he was a whistleblower, they ultimately gave him $104 million. But he keeps talking. And I keep asking him, I said, are you nuts? I mean, why would you keep talking? I would just shut up and take the money and run, and I wouldn't put your, what out there. But anyway, want to find out, why is it you keep talking, and why did you go to jail?
Well, I keep talking because I think the American people deserve better. The political network that's working is not working today, and it needs to be exposed. Just to give you an example, my Senate testimony that I gave, a 10-hour Senate testimony under oath with a stenographer, they refused to give me my own testimony. They won't give it to me. They said, you can't have your own testimony. I said, what do you mean I can't have my own testimony? It exonerates me. And it exonerates me, but they won't give it to me. So that's one thing. The second thing is the American people should be outraged because what I've been doing, and I continue to do, and I will continue to do it time and time again, is exposing the corrupt Department of Justice for their illegal conduct and cover-up in this massive tax case. This is so alarming, and it should be alarming to every American who listens to your program and says, hey, wait a minute, why is he the only one to go to jail, but yet the same government paid him $104 million? Why is it that no other bankers went to jail? Why is it that Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, got involved in an international criminal investigation? Why is it they didn't find the bank properly? Why isn't that they didn't get all 19,000 names? The list goes on, gentlemen. And the other problem here is, if you start looking at the political elite that were in the Obama administration, you begin to realize why. First, not only Hillary Clinton's involvement in this and accepting monies to the Clinton Foundation from the Swiss government. It's on my website. You can go check the articles. It's there. It's been proven. And the second thing is this. Eric Holder, in private practice with Covington and Burling, a big law firm in Washington, his biggest client was UBS.
Eric Holder's Attorney General, who also approved a number of other interesting actions, should I say, like Fast and Furious, the shipping guns to the Mexicans.
And denied it. Yeah.
I mean, I just can't believe it. It violates every so-called ethical, moral sense and legal sense of how we operate. But what you're saying here as a whistleblower is you're saying it's a web at the very top permeating the country and the world. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And you can go further. You dig a little further. Remember when Tim Geithner was the president of the Federal Reserve? In the deferred prosecution agreement, they had said specifically, we spoke to the president of the Federal Reserve Bank, and they are not going to impose any more fines on UBS. So they underfined them, and Tim Geithner, Turbo Tim, who can't even pay his own taxes, approved that. So then he was made Treasury Secretary by Barack Obama. But this is the worst case of all. When I went to the U.S. Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, who held hearings on UBS, and it's on my website. You can see the videos, you can see the reports, the 400-page reports, all due to me. At that same time, a certain senator, Senator Barack Obama, never attended one of those hearings. Not one in 2008. Instead, he was filling his pockets with millions of dollars of political campaign contributions from UBS. That's an impeachable offense. He should never have been president of the United States. The very fact that he violated his oath to the U.S. Constitution, he never attended those hearings, but yet at the same time was taking money from a bank that was under criminal investigation. I guess that's the way they do it in Chicago.
Well, he's also from Hawaii, and Hawaii is in my opinion, the most corrupt state in the whole United States. Just the most. I mean, we've had 5 U.S. Supreme Court justices had to step down for criminal behavior, but they got off. Don't worry, they got off. So anyway, I want to ask Tom. Again, Tom is my personal tax advisor. He's the author of Tax-Free Wealth. But Tom, what has changed since this whole thing blew up that Brad Birkenfeld blew the whistle on?
Well, seriously, Brad, you did change the world. I'll tell you, you certainly changed the CPA world, my world, because of the disclosures that are now required since this scandal erupted. Now, it's a couple of things happen. First of all, it's very difficult now for an American to get a bank account overseas because the banks say we have to disclose.
They're afraid of us.
They're absolutely afraid of us. And the second is that there are a very serious reporting requirements. So everything has to be disclosed to the U.S. government. It's done via tax reporting. And we disclose all those things, okay, for all of our clients. And so as long as you disclose that, and as long as you're not hiding money, in other words, you're not committing tax fraud, it's okay to put your money overseas. There's nothing illegal about putting your money overseas. You just have to disclose and you have to pay your taxes. But if you do those two things, then you can put all the money you want overseas.
So why did you go to jail again, Brad?
Even in my case, the judge in my case was forced by the Supreme Court justice to disclose all of his assets where he refused to do it. Justice Rehnquist said, no, you're going to have to show all your assets like every federal judge. And he didn't want to do it. Judge Locke the total zero. He lives in Fort Lauderdale, and you can understand why people are thinking there's no justice. This is a gambit of these guys just running roughshod over everyone.
I'd agree with you.
The reason why I went to jail, they didn't catch me. I came to them. I was hiding in the Department of Justice in Washington. I mean, it was insane. I went to the Department of Justice. I went to the Internal Revenue Service. I went to the Securities and Exchange Commission. I went to the U.S. Senate. All of this before I was ever indicted. I was trying to do the right thing. So instead, they turn it on me and make me the bad guy because I'm low-hanging fruit.
Right.
And they let the biggest bank in the world walk with the most criminal conduct you've ever witnessed in your life. And it's global, gentlemen.
Right. So this is my question. Has anything really changed? Has that changed in other parts of the world? The United States is pretty tough on it. But do other countries still allow criminals to hide money?
Well, I would say that, the CIA has been known to hide monies in Switzerland for years. Just go back to Iran-Contra when General Secord sent $10 million to the wrong bank account and they wouldn't give it back. I mean, this was laughable. And you think about the insanity of the way in which drug money from the CIA has laundered itself through Switzerland. And I'll give you a better example, more recent. Remember when Barack Obama decided to send $1.4 billion to Iran?
Right.
Well, that was a brilliant move.
I know.
And because he's so intelligent on foreign policy, that's why he did such a wonderful job. He sent $1.5 billion in cash on a private jet from Geneva, Switzerland to Tehran. Now, does the United States government have bank accounts in Geneva?
It's a good question. Where'd the money come from?
See, Brad, the reason I'm laughing, the reason I'm laughing is that when I was a young Marine pilot, I was asked to fly for the CIA, and starting pay was $85,000 a year, plus a $300,000 bonus for running drugs. And when I tell people that, they say you're lying. I said, okay, I'm lying. Why would I lie? And when Hassanpour got shot down, for the Iran-Contra and all that, that was all drug money going for the CIA. And Americans think, no, we would never do that. And so I'm glad you said it because I've been saying it for so long that I look like a liar now. Anyway, thank you.
No. Not only aren't you a liar, but I can tell you another thing is that when you finish reading my book, and hopefully your audience will pick up the book to read it, I think it's a very educational book about the corruption in the biggest banks and biggest governments of the world. But the thing is this, Robert, is that what you've got here is in my book, there was a gentleman I met in prison named Bill Hillard. And he told me, without giving too much away, that he was hired to kill POWs if they escaped.
Right.
Because the reason was the CIA and the KGB were at each other's throats and they knew what each other was doing. And instead of getting the POWs out, they wanted to kill them because otherwise they'd come out and say they're running drugs and not trying to release us.
Right.
Now, people might say that's a crazy story. Well, go read the book, Kiss the Boys Goodbye. This book, Casino Man in the book, was the gentleman I met in prison, Bill Hillard, with two of his buddies from Delta Force and in Vietnam, and they were hired to kill POWs escaped. And one POW did escape. He got to Thailand. Go read it in the book. He got indicted for treason.
I know what you're talking about, Brad. I know. When people laugh, people talk about waterboarding. That was lightweight what we had to do. But anyway, I want to thank you, Brad. The book is Lucifer's Banker. Again, please do as Brad requests. He's risking his life to disclose it all in a book. And if you want to keep your eyes and ears and mouth shut, then listen to this program again and then share it with friends and family and business associates. It's time we wake up, ladies and gentlemen. So before we're going to ask Robert, and we give Tom one quick question on taxes.
Our first question today, Robert, comes from James in Denver. Favorite book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He says, I've recently heard about using self-directed IRAs to purchase rental properties. It sounds too good to be true. Is there a catch? Is any retirement account safe in a collapse? IRAs versus 401ks?
I'm glad Tom is here because I have no idea what you're talking about. Look, Donald Trump doesn't have a 401k or an IRA. You see, the reason most people are poor, they're doing what poor middle class people do. So the reason I'm glad you're listening to the Rich Dad radio program is you'll find out that's not what we do. So I have no idea what you're talking about, but Tom might. Tom, what's your answer to that?
So this is the dumbest idea ever, okay? Just for the record, to actually invest in a tax shelter inside an IRA, which will actually cause you to pay tax on your real estate. So it's a bad idea, but Robert's exactly right. The rich don't use IRAs, 401ks, pension plans. What the rich use is they use what we call a non-qualified plan. If you hear something called a qualified plan, which is an IRA, 401k, pension plan, it means that the government is controlling it. Okay, that's what it means. And so a non-qualified means the government doesn't control it. So take your money out. If you're going to invest in real estate, don't leave it in an IRA. Pay the 10% penalty. It's no big deal. And then invest in real estate, because what you lose when you invest inside an IRA, you lose the debt, which is one of the reasons we invest in real estate, and you lose the tax benefits. So, why would you do it?
So once again, what Tom is talking about, invest through things, an entity like an S corporation, LLC, and things like that, but be professional. Be bigger than the poor and middle class out there. I don't have an IRA. Tom doesn't have an IRA. Trump doesn't have a 401k. You've got to ask yourself why.
No, Robert pays very little in tax. Ken McElroy is a real estate investor, pays very little in tax. And the reason they do is because they don't invest through an IRA. If they invest through an IRA, they pay huge taxes.
And I hate to be the bad news about it, but if you want to live debt-free and pay a lot of tax, don't follow Rich Dad advice. But Tom has to run. He's got another program to run to. So thanks, Tom. It was an interesting program, wasn't it?
Absolutely fascinating. I mean, that very, very interesting story. And literally, Brad changed the world.
Right.
He did.
And so just to know that, Tom, I do the same thing, but I do it legally through Tom. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
So, Melissa, what's the next question?
Our next question, Robert, comes from James in Brooklyn, New York. Favorite book, Rich Dad Guide to Investing. He says, Robert, I was talking to my uncle the other day who works for a futures trading company and was telling him about what you guys say about the common mutual funds and 401k plans. His response to me was that you need to learn how to invest by actually investing and not doing a bunch of research. So is opening an account with mutual funds a good idea for a 19-year-old aspiring to be financially free?
That's a good question, and I think your uncle has very good advice for you, but that's not what the rich do. I'm really doing my best to tell you, I don't have a 401k, I don't have an IRA, I have no mutual funds, I have no ETFs, and I have no stocks and bonds. So the question to you would be, well, what the heck do we do? Just remember, President Trump does not have a 401k. The question is, what does he do? And that's why we have the Rich Dad radio show. That's why we have people like Tom Wheelwright, his book's Tax-Free Wealth. That's why we have Ken McElroy on real estate. That's why we have Andy Tanner on 401 Chaos, why that's the worst possible investment strategy you could have. And also this is why we also have Garrett Sutton on asset protection. The reason I'm not in this country is for asset protection. I do it legally. Because the more successful you become in this country, the more people will sue you through a corrupt judicial system. All you have to do is have money, and somebody can say, you did this, and I can sue you. I want everything you got. So look, sports fans. You can listen to those guys who say, cut up your credit cards. And that's good advice from most people who are not incompetent. Second is live debt free, and that's really good for most middle class, and they should have a 401k and IRA and all this. But this is the Rich Dad radio program. It's about investing in you so you don't have to give your money over to somebody else who has no idea what they're talking about. So being 19, you're fine. I'll just leave you one more thing. All you have to do is watch television, and you'll see the people that advertise the most on television what to do with your money are the very people that Brad Birkenfeld was talking about, Lucifer's bankers. The bankers are still not in jail. They're still telling you to give them their money, and they're still never going to go to jail because, like he talked about Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, they're all part of this giant web of crony capitalism. So the Rich Dad radio program is here for you to listen to, but if you just sit there and open your 401k and IRA and ETFs, have a good life, but that's not what we do. Next question, Melissa.
Our next question comes from Sam in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Favorite book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Says, how do I find super smart accountants and financial advisors in my area? Do you, Robert, have a Rich Dad test?
Look, that's like asking me, how can I find the perfect date or the perfect wife? Maybe I should go to Match.com. I mean, maybe that's what you should do, really. But the only way you're going to know if you have a good accountant or attorney and all that is you kiss a lot of frogs. You make a lot of mistakes. You know, that's how you learn. And you somehow think that taking a test will answer the question. That's what stupid school teachers tell you to do. Take the test. But the answer isn't the test. The answer is, what do you know? What can you prove? Show me your financial statement. Show me the money. So that's why we have the Rich Dad program. We had another person last program. What she wanted me to tell her. What did she want me to tell her?
I think she was asking.
How to get a raise.
Yes.
How to get a raise. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I said, and we were discussing this book by an FBI negotiator. I said, read the book so you'll learn how to get what you want through negotiation. No, she just wants me to tell her how to get a raise. I mean, that is a peasant's idea. That is, you're just one step over a slave at that point. So really, it's time to get educated. Just don't ask me to tell you what to do. Please listen, you guys. This is not, live below your means show. That's why this show is so important today. And I'm glad Brad Birkenfeld was on the program. It's called Lucifer's Banker. Understand it is legal if you do it legally. So next question, Melissa.
Okay, our final question today, Robert, is from Ethan in Dallas, Texas, Rich Dad Guide to Investing. He says, Robert, how do you combat corruption in our institutions? Do you think corruption will continue to increase?
Corruption? Are you kidding me? The whole system's corrupt. I mean, that's why Donald Trump went there to drain the swamp. Unfortunately, he is dealing with the most corrupt people on earth. Exactly as Bradley Birkenfeld said, the richest guys are still on television. They're still out there advertising to turn their money over to them and all this. Look at Wells Fargo. Just two guys have to return $78 million. Wells Fargo paid these two guys $78 million. How much money does a banker make that they have to pay back $78 million? How corrupt are they? So if you understand that our banking system, our corporate system, our judicial system is full of corruption, it's just rife right now. Just rife. Everybody's on the take. If you know that, that's why we have Rich Dad Advisors. That's why we have the Rich Dad Radio Show. Your real job is to find your personal team. There's a new book called Sunny Skies and Shady Characters. It's about Hawaii, how corrupt Hawaii is. The great thing about this book is written by a advertiser reporter, and he names names. He names the same names my father mentioned when he ran for lieutenant governor of Hawaii. This is in the 70s, my father said to me, I can't stand it anymore. The corruption in Hawaii is so rampant, I can no longer sit here and take it. So he ran against his boss. And in the book, Sunny Skies and Shady Characters, the reporter says, Governor Ariyoshi, who my father ran against, his best friend was Larry May Howe. That's like saying the biggest criminal in Hawaii. And people got taken out all the time in Hawaii. Bodies floated. That's how corrupt Hawaii is. That's why Hawaii right now is 100% Democratic. And the reason is corruption is rampant there. So please open your eyes, listen, read, study. But the most important thing is find your